Out there in the quietest parts of the world, buried deep in jungles or even under the waves, you can find the bones of old empires. Today, we're going to take a walk through those ruins because their ghosts might just be trying to tell us something terrifying about our own world. And that, right there, is the central, chilling lesson. It's whispered by every fallen stone and every buried city. It's this constant reminder that the feeling of permanence we have, well, it's probably just an illusion.
So, that brings us to our core idea for today. We're going to enter what I like to call the Museum of Dust. Each exhibit is a fallen titan, a civilization that truly believed it had conquered nature and time itself, only to find out, the hard way, that they were dead wrong.
Our whole goal here is to really examine the lessons written in these ruins. Because if you can understand how the greatest civilizations of the past failed, well, you start to get a pretty critical look at the foundations we're all standing on today. Okay, first things first, let's be really clear about what collapse actually is. It's almost never some big cinematic event, like a meteor strike. It's usually a slow-motion catastrophe, a perfect storm, this deadly cocktail where the environment, the economy, and the government all start to fail at once. So for our first exhibit, we're going to explore the most fundamental relationship of all, the one between a civilization and its environment. So what happens when that bond finally breaks? Let's jump back to around 2300 BCE, to Mesopotamia. Here we have the Akkadian Empire, the world's first true empire. These people were absolute masters of engineering. They built these massive canal systems to turn a bone-dry desert into a total breadbasket. But this is where their greatest strength became their fatal flaw. See, year after year, as they flooded their fields, the intense sun would evaporate the water, but it left the salt behind. Over centuries, they literally poisoned their own soil. And then the final blow came from the sky. A catastrophic, centuries-long mega-drought, we now call it the 4.2 kilo-year event, just gripped the entire region. The rivers dried up, the crops failed completely, and the world's first empire simply starved. So the Akkadians basically engineered their own environmental trap. But, they weren't the only ones to fall to nature. Let's head over to a neighboring civilization that faced a totally different but just as final geographical problem. The Indus Valley civilization was huge, super advanced, and, get this, remarkably peaceful. Their whole society was built on trade and incredibly sophisticated water management, all of it fed by the mighty Saraswati River. But what happens when your lifeblood just vanishes? Around 1900 BCE, tectonic plates shifted, the climate changed, and that's exactly what happened. The river dried up. The Indus people didn't die in some big war, their civilization just slowly faded away as their world became unlivable. Okay, so the fate of the Indus people shows us how a single point of failure can unravel an entire society. But what happens when it's not just one river that disappears, but the whole network that connects you to the world? What happens when that interconnectedness, your greatest strength, suddenly becomes your greatest vulnerability?
By about 1200 BCE, the Mediterranean was basically the world's first globalized economy. You had the Mycenaeans, the Hittites, the Egyptians, all connected by this complex web of trade. They all relied on each other for the copper and tin they needed to make bronze, which was, the foundation of all their power.
And then, in a shockingly short amount of time, the whole thing fell apart. It started with what historians call an earthquake storm that toppled palaces. Then came crippling drought and famine, which created so much chaos that it unleashed waves of desperate refugees we now call the Sea Peoples. These groups severed the trade routes, the tin stopped flowing, and suddenly the great empires couldn't even make the weapons they needed to survive. Their greatest asset, their interconnectedness, became their doom. But it's not always an outside shock that's the killer. Sometimes the most dangerous enemy is yourself. Let's take a look at how some empires managed to rot from the inside out. So let's head to the jungles of Mesoamerica. The classic Maya built these magnificent cities. They were brilliant scientists, no doubt about it, but their entire civilization was built on the thin, fragile soil of the jungle, a real ecological knife edge. And you can see their hubris laid bare in the very construction of their temples. To create that beautiful white stucco that coated their pyramids, Maya kings ordered the burning of just immense amounts of green wood. And the ratio, it's just staggering. It took 20 tons of forest to create just 1 ton of plaster. They were literally burning their own life support system for vanity. This massive deforestation actually caused localized droughts, which were then made way worse by a major climate shift. And when the holy kings, who were supposed to guarantee rain, right, couldn't make the skies open, the people lost faith. The social contract just shattered. This led to constant warfare and eventually the abandonment of their magnificent cities.
And then, of course, there's Rome. Rome wasn't felled by a single blow. It was more like death by 1,000 internal cuts. Its economy was wrecked by hyperinflation, plagues wiped out millions, which shrank the tax base and the army. They became totally over-reliant on foreign mercenaries who weren't always loyal. And all of this was happening just as the climate itself was getting colder and a lot less predictable.
So here's the crucial point in all of this. Looking at these fallen empires is a lot like looking into a mirror. The patterns of collapse, they just echo through time, and, well, they have some really profound implications for our own globalized world. Across every single one of these stories, we see the same fundamental cracks appear. You could almost call them the 4 pillars of collapse. First, pushing up against hard environmental limits. Second, creating economic systems that are way too fragile. Third, losing the social trust that holds a society together. And finally, getting hit by a changing climate you just can't predict anymore. And this forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question, doesn't it? We have built the most complex, the most interconnected, and the most energy-hungry civilization in the history of the world. But are we really immune to the same forces that brought down the Akkadians, the Maya, and even Rome? I mean, think about it. The foundation of their world was bronze and grain, connected by fragile ceilings. The foundation of our world is fiber optics and fossil fuels, connected by instantaneous global supply chains. So the question is our system actually stronger, or is it just more complexly fragile? You know, the final lesson from our Museum of Dust is maybe the most sobering of all. This famous quote suggests that, in the end, collapse is a choice. The real question these ruins are asking us is a simple one. Will we learn to read the warnings written in the dust, or are we destined to become the next exhibit?
Please like and subscribe.